Hi, everybody. So let's talk about the Phillips curve practice sheet. Just want to go over with you some of these questions, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit better about just practicing with this before we get into some more meatier FRQs. So, in number one, it says, assume that the United States is currently experiencing full employment and the government cuts personal income taxes by 5%. Show the short run effects of this on the aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph, and then also the long run and short run Phillips curve. Remember that both of these graphs show the same exact economy, just through two different vantage points. So it doesn't matter which graph you use for which. On my answer key, you're going to see that I put the Phillips curve graphs on the left and I put the aggregate demand, aggregate supply on the right. It doesn't matter to me where you put them, just so long as you see what the relationship is. So your aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph for this question should show a fully employed economy in the beginning. And then you'll notice we're working with cutting taxes. So if we cut personal income taxes, this means that aggregate demand is going to shift to the right because consumption is going to go up. You'll notice that by shifting to the right over here, we're going to show that on the Phillips curve. So point A is where we're starting, and we want to have that where the lines intersect, because remember, that's what a fully employed economy looks like when you use these two. Then, because aggregate demand is shifting to the right, we're going to show that shift on the Phillips curve to the left. Remember that we demand to be on the line and that we're going to be like elevator doors. So on these two curves, if you put them side by side, and again, it doesn't matter if you put one on the left or the right, the points are going to move away from each other or they're going to move towards each other. So in this context, you see the aggregate demand shifting to the right, and therefore you see the Phillips curve shifting to the left. Let's look at the next one. The next one says, assume that country Z is currently experiencing recession. So you're going to have that short run equilibrium on the left side of the long run, right? And now we're going to have to show, it says, suppose there's a significant decrease in energy prices. Now you have to show the effect. So you have to think about how energy is a major input price for all goods and services. So that means that this is a short run aggregate supply shifter, and that means it's going to be shifting to the right, because energy is now cheaper. So businesses have this major input that is cheaper. They're going to be able to produce more. So if we shift the short run aggregate supply to the right, then that means we're going to shift the entire short run Phillips curve. Remember, supply a new line, and we're going to shift that to the left. So let's look at the answer key. So with a recessionary gap, we're starting out here, and we're going to see that short run aggregate supply shift to the right. Notice how we have the recessionary gap over here, and we're going to shift that whole short run Phillips curve to the left. Now, some of you might be wondering, she shifted it all the way to full employment. Did I have to do that? There wasn't any information to support that it absolutely went to full employment. So no, you don't have to show that, but your graphs have to show the same thing. So if you shifted your short run aggregate supply to the right, but you didn't quite reach full employment, then you shouldn't be putting point B on the line over here. So if I show full employment on this aggregate demand, aggregate supply, then I have to show full employment on the other one too. So there's a little bit of leeway in this graph. So you might not have these at full employment, but you do show that shifting to the right on the aggregate supply, and then you also show the shifting to the left on the Phillips curve. Let's take a look at number 3. Number 3 says, assume that the United States is currently operating at long run equilibrium. So again, at point A is going to be on the line where they intersect on both of these. The government's going to cut spending by $50 million. Again, is that a demand shifter or a supply? It's government spending. It's a demand shifter. This means that demand is going to shift to the left. So I should have a short run Phillips curve and long run aggregate supply where point A is right where they intersect. And then demand is going to shift to the left over here. Remember, I demand to be on the line. I'm going to keep that point on the line, and I'm going to shift it in the opposite direction. Here are the elevator doors closing towards each other. And number 4, we're going to see that Fisherland is currently experiencing an inflationary gap. So that means on our aggregate supply, aggregate demand, the point of the short-run equilibrium is going to be beyond full employment, right? So it's going to be on the right side of full employment. And the central bank opts to sell securities on the open market. Ooh, so what's that going to do? Putting everything together. So, if you sell securities, that means the money supply is going to be smaller, right? And that's going to raise interest rates. That then is going to discourage household borrowing and business borrowing. So, this is going to shift aggregate demand to the left, meaning that your point on the Phillips curve is going to shift to the right. So, let's take a look at this with Fisherland. So we started with an inflationary gap. You can see that on my answer key over here. We're producing beyond full employment. We're going to shift to the left. Now, I did move it all the way to the line because I'm operating on the assumption that the central bank is selling the exact amount of securities that would be necessary to contract the economy by using the multiplier effect to full employment. Now, because I've chosen to shift it all the way to the line, I must show point A starting at an inflationary gap over here in the Phillips curve, going to full employment over here as well. So notice my aggregate demand is, I'm going to do this reverse. My aggregate demand is shifting to the left, right? So that means that my short run Phillips curve must shift to the right. The point on it, rather, must shift to the right. Remember, elevator doors, they're either moving towards each other or away from each other. And again, demanding to be on the line. So that's your practice with the Phillips curve handout. I've also included the PDF of this document on the new post if you want to see that as well.